Mason Greenwood to Man United, breaking down the January transfer rumours that have everyone talking. Welcome back to United Daily Updates, your trusted source for everything Manchester United. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel where we bring you daily updates, breaking news, and honest analysis about our beloved club. We don't do clickbait here. We give you the facts, the context, and the real story behind every headline. Today we're diving deep into one of the most talked about stories in recent weeks. Mason Greenwood. Manchester United. A possible return. January transfer window. These words together have created a storm of discussion across social media, forums, and every United fan group you can think of. Is this real? Is it possible? Should it even happen? These are the questions on everyone's mind right now. By the end of this article, you'll have a complete understanding of what's actually happening, what's just newspaper talk, and what the future might really hold. We're going to break this down piece by piece, looking at the football side, the business side, the human side, and everything in between. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's get into it. The story that started it all. Let me paint the picture for you. It's late October 2025. Manchester United are going through another challenging period. Results haven't been great. The team looks like it needs fresh ideas and new energy. Then suddenly, reports start appearing. Mason Greenwood is playing well at Marseille. Really well. And according to some sources, Manchester United are watching. Not just watching casually, but actually considering bringing him back. In January, just over a year after he left, the story spread like wildfire. Some fans were excited. Others were angry. Many were confused. How could this even be on the table? But here's the thing about modern football media. Not every story you read is based on solid information. Some stories are built on tiny pieces of truth mixed with a lot of guesswork. Some are completely made up to get clicks. And some fall somewhere in between. So what's really going on here? Let's start from the beginning and work our way through this step by step. Who is Mason Greenwood and why does this matter? For anyone who might be new to following United, let me give you some background. Mason Greenwood came through the Manchester United Academy. He was one of the most exciting young talents England had seen in years. We're talking about a player who could finish with both feet, had incredible composure, and seemed destined for superstardom. He made his first team debut as a teenager. He scored important goals. He became a regular starter. By the age of 20, he looked like he could become one of United's main players for the next decade. Then everything changed in early 2022. Greenwood was arrested following serious allegations. The details were all over the news and social media. Manchester United suspended him immediately. He didn't play for the club again for over a year. In February 2023, the criminal charges against him were dropped. The case was closed by the authorities. But for Manchester United, the situation was far from simple. The club faced enormous pressure from fans, sponsors, women's groups, and the media. United conducted their own internal investigation. It took months. Finally, in August 2023, they announced that Greenwood would leave the club. They said it was a mutual decision. They said it was best for everyone involved, including Greenwood himself, that he rebuild his career elsewhere. He went on loan to Getafe in Spain for the 2023-24 season. He played well there. He scored goals. He showed he could still perform at a high level. Then in summer 2024, he made a permanent move to Olympique de Marseille in France. That's where he is now. And that's where this story gets interesting. What's happening at Marseille right now? Mason Greenwood joined Marseille in the summer of 2024. The transfer fee was reported to be somewhere between £26 and £30 million. That's a significant amount of money, especially for a player with his complicated background. But here's the important part. He's been playing well. Actually, more than well. He's been one of Marseille's better players this season. Let me give you some context about what playing well actually means. In football, we can look at statistics, but we also need to watch the games and understand the bigger picture. Greenwood has been scoring goals. He's been creating chances for teammates. He's showing the kind of form that made everyone excited about him in the first place. Marseille is a big club. They're one of the most successful teams in French football history. They have passionate fans and high expectations. The fact that Greenwood has settled in well and become an important player for them is significant. French football might not get as much attention as the Premier League, but it's still a top league. Players like Kylian Mbappé, Neymar, and many others have shown that you can be world-class while playing in France. The standard is high. So when we say Greenwood is doing well at Marseille, we're not talking about him scoring goals against weak opposition in a farmers' league. We're talking about genuine good performances in a competitive environment. This is important because it's the foundation for all the transfer rumors. If he was struggling at Marseille, nobody would be talking about any club wanting to sign him. But because he's playing well, people are starting to wonder. Could he play in the Premier League again? Could he play for a top club again? Could he play for Manchester United again? The transfer rumors. Where did they come from? Now let's talk about how these rumors actually started. In football, transfer stories don't just appear out of nowhere. They usually come from somewhere, even if that somewhere isn't always reliable. Several media outlets have reported on Manchester United's supposed interest in Greenwood. We're talking about sources like TalkSport, TeamTalk, Tribuna, and Football 365. These are established football media platforms. They're not random Twitter accounts or fan blogs. But here's what you need to understand about football journalism. There are different levels of reliability. Some stories come from journalists who have real sources inside clubs. These journalists have built relationships with agents, club officials, and people close to players. When they report something, there's usually something real behind it. Other stories are based on logical guesswork. A journalist might think, well, United need a striker, Greenwood is playing well, United have a sell-on clause, so maybe they're interested. They write the story based on that logic, even without concrete information from inside the club. And some stories are just designed to get clicks. Controversial topics get attention. Greenwood returning to United would be hugely controversial. Controversial means more people clicking, reading, and sharing. More clicks mean more money from advertising. So which type of story is this? That's the million-dollar question. The reports mention that United are monitoring Greenwood. In football speak, monitoring is a very vague term. It can mean anything from we have scouts watching every game and detailed reports on his desk to yeah, we're aware he exists and we see the highlights like everyone else. The reports also mention Ruben Amorim. For those who might not know, Amorim is the manager of Sporting Lisbon in Portugal. He's done an incredible job there. He's young, he's talented, and he's been heavily linked with the Manchester United job. According to some reports, Amorim is interested in Greenwood and sees him as a player who could fit into his system. But here's the problem with that claim. As of right now, Amorim isn't the Manchester United manager. He might become the manager. The links are strong. But nothing is confirmed. So we're being asked to believe that a manager who hasn't been appointed yet is already making transfer plans for a player who left the club under difficult circumstances just over a year ago. Does that sound likely to you? Let's talk about the football side. Putting aside all the controversy for a moment, let's look at this purely from a football perspective. Would Mason Greenwood actually improve Manchester United right now? The answer, if we're being honest about his ability, is probably yes. At his best, Greenwood is a top-quality forward. He can play on the right wing. He can play as a striker. He's two-footed, which is rare and valuable. He can score different types of goals. Manchester United have struggled for goals this season. The team creates chances but doesn't always finish them. Having another player who can score would obviously help. Greenwood is also young. He's only 23 years old. In football terms, that's still very young for an attacker. Players in his position often don't hit their peak until their mid to late 20s. So if you're thinking long-term, he has years of potential development ahead of him. He also knows the club. He came through the academy. He knows how Manchester United works. He wouldn't need time to adapt to a new country, a new language, or a new style of football. That's an advantage compared to signing a foreign player. From a pure ability standpoint, there's a case to be made. But football isn't played in a vacuum. There are so many other factors to consider. The business side, money and contracts. Let's talk about money because in modern football, you always have to talk about money. Understanding the financial side of this story helps us understand whether it's realistic or not. When Greenwood moved to Marseille, United reportedly included a sell-on clause in the deal. This is very common in football. It means that if Marseille sell Greenwood to another club in the future, Manchester United get a percentage of that transfer fee. The exact percentage hasn't been made public, but these clauses typically range from 10% to 50% depending on the deal. Let's say United have a 30% sell-on clause as an example. If Marseille sold Greenwood for £60 million, United would receive £18 million. That's a nice chunk of money for a player you've already sold. But here's where it gets interesting from United's perspective. If United themselves wanted to buy Greenwood back, they could potentially negotiate a deal where they don't have to pay the full market value because they own that sell-on clause. Some reports have suggested this is part of the thinking. United could bring back a talented player without spending as much money as another club would have to spend. However, there are problems with this logic. First, Marseille only just bought Greenwood a few months ago. They spent significant money on him. They've invested time in helping him settle. He's playing well for them. Why would they sell him now? In football, clubs very rarely sell their best players in the middle of the season unless something has gone badly wrong. It disrupts the team. It makes it harder to achieve your goals for that season. And it makes you look weak in the transfer market. Marseille would have no reason to sell in January unless someone offered them crazy money. And I mean really crazy. We're probably talking £80 million or more. That's not going to happen. Could it happen in the summer? Maybe. But even that seems unlikely unless Greenwood specifically asks to leave or unless Marseille's financial situation forces them to sell. The business case for United buying him back just doesn't make much sense right now. You're paying money to buy back a player you just sold, creating huge controversy in the process, and probably spending more than you received when you sold him in the first place. What about the manager situation? Let's talk about Ruben Amorim since his name keeps coming up in these reports. Amorim is one of the most exciting young managers in European football. He's won titles with Sporting Lisbon. He's developed young players. He plays attractive attacking football. Manchester United have been looking for a new direction. Erik ten Hag's time at the club has been difficult. Results have been inconsistent. The style of play hasn't been convincing. Change feels inevitable at some point. Amorim fits the profile of what United might want. He's young enough to build something long-term but experienced enough to handle a big club. He's proven he can win. He's shown he can develop talent. But here's the crucial point. As of right now, he's not the Manchester United manager. He's still at Sporting Lisbon. Yes, there are strong links. Yes, it might happen. But nothing is confirmed. So when reports say Amorim wants Greenwood, we need to be skeptical. How would anyone know what a manager who hasn't been appointed yet wants to do in a transfer window that's still weeks away? This is classic football media speculation. Someone has connected the dots and created a story. Amorim might become United manager. United might want to strengthen their attack. Greenwood is doing well. Therefore, Amorim wants Greenwood. See how that works? It sounds logical until you really think about it. Then you realize it's built on a lot of assumptions. Even if Amorim does become United manager, would he really want to make signing Greenwood one of his first moves? That would dominate all the headlines. It would create massive controversy. It would overshadow everything else he's trying to do. Most new managers want to make a positive first impression. They want to talk about their ideas, their philosophy, their vision for the team. They don't want their first few weeks to be dominated by controversy and difficult questions about a player's past. The huge elephant in the room. Okay, we've talked about the football. We've talked about the money. We've talked about the manager. Now we need to talk about the thing that makes this whole situation so complicated. The thing that many articles mention briefly but don't really dig into. The reason why this isn't just another transfer rumor. Mason Greenwood left Manchester United because of what happened in 2022. The allegations. The arrest. The charges. Even though those charges were dropped, the situation left everyone in a difficult position. Manchester United spent months trying to figure out what to do. They did an internal investigation. They spoke to people involved. They looked at evidence that the public didn't see. And in the end, they decided that Greenwood should leave. The club statement at the time was carefully worded. They said they recognized the difficulties and acknowledged that the case had been closed. They said they didn't find that Greenwood had done what he was originally charged with. But they also said it was best for everyone that he rebuild his career away from Manchester United. That decision came after enormous pressure from multiple sides. Women's groups protested outside Old Trafford. Fans were divided. Some wanted him to stay, others demanded he leave. Sponsors were concerned. Politicians commented on it. It became much bigger than just a football story. Rachel Riley, a famous Manchester United supporter and TV presenter, was one of many who spoke out strongly against Greenwood returning to the team. She wasn't alone. There were petitions. There were threats of boycotts. The atmosphere was intense. In the end, United made their choice. Greenwood left. He went to Spain, then to France. Life moved on. But here's the question that makes these new rumors so controversial. If Manchester United decided just over a year ago that it was best for Greenwood to leave, how could they now decide to bring him back? What would have changed? The facts of what happened in 2022 haven't changed. The public perception hasn't really changed. The people who were against him returning then would almost certainly be against it now. If United announced tomorrow that they were signing Greenwood, the reaction would be massive. Social media would explode. The traditional media would run with the story for weeks. There would be protests. There would be debates. There would be sponsors asking difficult questions. Is any football club willing to go through all of that? Is it worth it? Even if you think Greenwood is an excellent player, is the controversy worth it? These are questions that go beyond football. They touch on issues of accountability, redemption, second chances, and what we as a society expect from public figures and institutions. What are fans actually saying? The Manchester United fanbase is not one single voice. It never has been. We're millions of people from different countries, different backgrounds, different ages, different perspectives. So when something controversial like this comes up, you get a full range of opinions. Some fans focus purely on football. They say the charges were dropped. They say everyone deserves a second chance. They point out that Greenwood is talented and could help the team. They argue that United shouldn't punish someone forever for something he wasn't convicted of. Other fans take a very different view. They point to what they saw and heard when the story first broke. They say that some things are more important than football. They argue that bringing Greenwood back would send the wrong message. They worry about what it would mean for the club's values and reputation. Then there's a large group in the middle who are conflicted. They appreciate Greenwood's talent. They understand that the legal case was closed. But they also feel uncomfortable. They're not sure what the right answer is. This division among fans is important because it shows how complicated this situation is. There's no clear consensus. There's no obvious right answer that everyone can agree on. If you go on Twitter, Reddit, or any United forum right now and search for discussions about Greenwood, you'll see every opinion under the sun. Some threads are thoughtful and nuanced. Others are angry and emotional. Many are somewhere in between. The club would be very aware of this division. They would know that whatever they do, a significant number of fans will be unhappy. That's a difficult position for any organization to be in. Could this actually happen? Let's try to answer the big question. Could Manchester United really sign Mason Greenwood in January 2025? To figure this out, we need to think about all the obstacles that would need to be overcome. First, Marseille would have to be willing to sell. We've already discussed why this seems unlikely. They just bought him. He's playing well. It's mid-season. They would have no reason to sell unless the offer was so big they couldn't refuse. Second, United would have to actually want him back. This means the people running the club would have to decide that the football benefits outweigh all the potential problems. That's a huge decision to make. Third, the new manager, whoever that might be, would have to approve it. No manager wants to walk into a controversy. They would need to be convinced that signing Greenwood is worth all the headaches it would create. Fourth, United would have to be prepared for the public reaction. They would need plans for how to handle the media. They would need to know what they're going to say to sponsors. They would need to be ready for protests and criticism. Fifth, Greenwood himself would have to want to come back. Remember, he's settled at Marseille. He's playing regularly. He's doing well. Would he want to return to a place where he would face constant scrutiny and where many people don't want him there? When you list it all out like that, it starts to seem pretty unlikely, doesn't it? There are just so many things that would need to line up perfectly. Could it happen in the summer instead of January? Maybe that's slightly more realistic. Marseille might be more open to selling after full season. The new manager would be more settled. There would be more time to prepare. But even then, all the other obstacles remain. The controversy doesn't go away just because you wait a few months. My honest assessment? A January move is extremely unlikely. Like, maybe a 5% chance. A summer move is still unlikely but slightly less impossible. Maybe a 15 or 20% chance. For it to actually happen, United would need to be desperate for attackers and convinced that no other options exist. They would need to believe that enough time has passed and that public opinion has shifted enough to make it workable. And they would need Marseille to agree to sell. That's a lot of IFS. What are the alternatives? If Manchester United do want to strengthen their attack in January or next summer, Greenwood is far from the only option. In fact, there are many alternatives that would be much less controversial and potentially just as effective on the pitch. Let's think about what United actually need. They need goals. They need creativity. They need players who can make things happen in the final third. There are dozens of players across Europe who fit that description. Some might cost more money than Greenwood would. Some might cost less. Some might be more proven. Some might be younger with more potential. But all of them would come without the baggage that a Greenwood transfer would bring. From a purely practical standpoint, why would United choose the most controversial option when other good options exist? Unless they believe that Greenwood is significantly better than all the alternatives, or unless they can get him for a much lower price than anyone else, it doesn't make sense to go down that road. This is another reason why these rumors seem more like media speculation than genuine transfer plans. If United were seriously planning to strengthen their attack, there are so many simpler ways to do it. The role of agents and media. We need to talk about something that many fans don't fully understand. The role that agents and media play in creating transfer stories. Football agents have an interest in keeping their clients in the news. When a player is talked about, when rumors circulate, it increases their profile. It makes other clubs aware of them. It can increase their market value. If you're Greenwood's agent, having stories about Manchester United being interested is good for your client. It suggests he's doing so well that even his former club wants him back. It makes other clubs think if United want him, maybe we should look at him too. Agents will often feed stories to journalists. They'll suggest things. They'll say I've heard that United are monitoring the situation or there's interest from England without providing concrete details. The journalist then writes a story based on that information. The journalist isn't necessarily lying. They're reporting what they've been told. But the source of the information has an agenda. They're not just sharing information out of the goodness of their heart. Similarly, media outlets have an interest in writing stories that get attention. A story about Greenwood potentially returning to United is guaranteed to get clicks, shares, and comments. It's controversial. It's surprising. It's emotional. All of those things drive engagement. This doesn't mean every story is fake. But it does mean we need to be smart about what we read and believe. We need to ask ourselves who benefits from this story being out there, and what evidence is actually being provided. In this case, the stories about United wanting Greenwood are based on him playing well and United having a sell-on clause. Those are facts. But the jump from those facts to United are planning to sign him in January is speculation. Learning from similar situations. It can be helpful to look at how other clubs have handled similar situations in the past. Have there been cases where a player left a club under difficult circumstances and then returned later? The answer is yes, but they're rare and usually involve very different circumstances. Carlos Tevez left Manchester United to join Manchester City. That was controversial because City were local rivals. A few years later, there were rumors about him possibly returning to United. It never happened. The bridge had been burned. Paul Pogba left United for Juventus, then returned years later for world record fee. But his departure wasn't controversial. He left because he wasn't playing. His return was still debated, but for football reasons, not personal ones. There aren't many examples of players returning to clubs after the kind of situation Greenwood was involved in. That's because clubs are generally very cautious about these things. The risks usually outweigh the potential rewards. One thing we can learn from football history is that clubs very rarely reverse big decisions quickly. When a club makes a difficult choice, especially one made under public pressure, they tend to stick with it. Changing course makes them look weak or suggests they got it wrong the first time. Manchester United made a clear decision in 2023. Greenwood should leave. For them to reverse that decision just over a year later would be very unusual. It would require extraordinary circumstances. The timing question. Let's talk about timing because it's really important to understanding why a January move seems so unlikely. The January transfer window is difficult for any deal. Clubs don't want to sell their best players mid-season. Buying clubs are often desperate, which drives prices up. And players who move in January have less time to settle before the end of the season. For a controversial signing like Greenwood would be, January is possibly the worst time. Here's why. United would be in the middle of their season. They would be fighting for top 4, trying to stay in cup competitions, dealing with injuries and form issues. Do they really want to add a massive controversy to all of that? The new manager, if there is one, would barely have had time to settle in. They would still be learning about their squad, implementing their ideas, building relationships. Do they want their first few months to be dominated by questions about Greenwood instead of questions about their football philosophy? From a public relations perspective, announcing the signing of Greenwood in the middle of winter, when people are already stressed and sensitive about various issues, seems like terrible timing. Summer would be slightly better. The season would be over. There would be more time to prepare the ground. The club could plan their communication strategy more carefully. They could try to control the narrative. But even in summer, it would be incredibly difficult. The timing question doesn't have a good answer because there might not be a good time for this to happen. What does Greenwood want? Throughout all of these discussions, we focused a lot on what Manchester United might want or what might make sense for them. But what about Greenwood himself? What does he want? Right now, he's at Marseille. He's playing regularly in a top league. He's scoring goals. He's living in the south of France, which is a pretty nice place to be. The pressure on him is probably lower than it would be in England, where every newspaper wants to write about him. Would he really want to return to Manchester United? Would he want to face the intense scrutiny that would come with that? Would he want to play for a club where he knows a significant number of fans don't want him there? Some players thrive under pressure. Others don't. We don't know which type Greenwood is. But it's worth considering that he might actually prefer to stay where he is. He's still young. He has time to rebuild his career slowly. If he continues playing well at Marseille for another year or two, other opportunities will come. He might have options to join big clubs where he doesn't have all the baggage that comes with United. From a purely practical standpoint, why would he choose the most difficult option? Unless he has a strong emotional connection to United and desperately wants to prove himself there, it might not be the smart choice for him. This is another angle that makes these transfer rumours questionable. We're assuming Greenwood would want to come back. That's not necessarily true. The bigger picture for Manchester United. Let's zoom out and look at where Manchester United are as a club right now. They're in a transitional period. New owners have come in through Sir Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS. There's talk of restructuring the football operations. There might be a new manager coming. When a club is trying to rebuild and create a new culture, they need to make smart decisions. They need to avoid unnecessary distractions. They need to focus on the football and on building something positive. Signing Greenwood would be the opposite of that. It would create distractions. It would divide the fan base. It would give the media something to criticize. It would overshadow any positive work being done. From a strategic standpoint, it doesn't make sense. United should be looking for ways to unite the fan base, to create positive momentum, to show they're moving in the right direction. A controversial signing does the opposite. This is why, even if Greenwood is talented, even if he could help the team on the pitch, it might not be the right move for the club at this moment in their history. Sometimes in football, timing is everything. The right player at the wrong time is still the wrong decision. What should United actually do? If I was advising Manchester United right now, what would I tell them to do about this situation? First, I would say forget about January. Don't even consider it. The timing is terrible. The complications are too great. Focus on other options if you need to strengthen. Second, I would say that even for summer, think very carefully. Make a list of all the pros and cons. Really think about what you're getting into. Consider alternatives. Third, if you do decide to pursue it, do your homework. Talk to fan groups. Talk to women's organizations. Talk to sponsors. Understand what the reaction will be and whether you can handle it. Fourth, be honest about why you're doing it. If it's purely a football decision, say that. If you believe in second chances and redemption, say that. Don't try to spin it or hide behind vague statements. Fifth, have a plan. If you sign him, how will you manage the situation? What support will he need? What support will the club need? What's your communication strategy? But honestly, my advice would probably be to move on. There are other good players out there. There are ways to strengthen the team without reopening this particular chapter. Sometimes the smart move is to leave the past in the past. The media's responsibility. We should also talk about the responsibility that media outlets have when reporting stories like this. Football journalism can be brilliant, but it can also be problematic. When you write a story about a sensitive topic, you have a responsibility to be clear about what you know and what you don't know. You should distinguish between facts and speculation. You should think about the impact your story might have. Some of the reporting on this Greenwood story has been good. Some outlets have been careful to say according to reports, or it's claimed that rather than stating things as facts. But other coverage has been less responsible. Some headlines make it sound like the deal is almost done when actually there's very little concrete information. Some articles don't properly explain the context of why this would be so controversial. As fans and readers, we need to be critical consumers of media. We need to read beyond the headlines. We need to ask where the information is coming from. We need to think about what's being presented as fact versus what's being presented as opinion or speculation. This particular story is a good example of why that matters. If you just read the headlines, you might think United are seriously planning to sign Greenwood in January. If you dig deeper and think critically about the information, you realize it's much more speculative than that. The human element. Behind all of this, behind the football tactics and the business decisions and the public relations concerns, there are real people. That's something we sometimes forget when we're debating transfer rumors and club strategies. Mason Greenwood is a real person. Whatever happened in his past, whatever the truth of that situation is, he's a human being who's trying to continue his career and his life. That's not easy when everything you do is analyzed and debated by millions of people. The people involved in the original situation are real people too. They have lives that were affected by what happened. They deserve consideration and respect. The Manchester United staff who would have to deal with Greenwood's return are real people. The women who work at the club, who might feel uncomfortable about the situation, are real people. The fans who would protest his return are real people with genuine convictions. The fans who would support his return are real people with their own reasons. It's easy to treat football stories like they're just entertainment or games. But when we're talking about situations like this, we need to remember the human element. Decisions have consequences for real people's lives. What happens next? So where do we go from here? What should we expect in the coming weeks and months? The January transfer window will open soon. We'll see whether any of these rumors have any substance. My prediction is that nothing will happen. United won't make a move for Greenwood. The story will fade away, at least for now. There might be more rumors in the build-up to the summer window. Especially if Greenwood continues to play well. Especially if United continue to struggle for goals. The media will write more stories. People will keep debating it. But I think the most likely outcome is that Greenwood stays at Marseille for at least another season. He'll continue his career there. He'll develop as a player. And at some point in the future, maybe in a year or two, some club will take a chance on him. Will that club be Manchester United? I don't know. Nobody knows. But based on everything we've discussed, based on all the obstacles and complications, I think it's unlikely. United will probably look elsewhere for attacking reinforcements. They'll find other players who can help them score goals. They'll move forward without reopening this particular chapter of their history. And that's probably the right decision for everyone involved. Why these rumors matter even if nothing happens? Even if nothing comes of these transfer rumors, they're still worth discussing. They tell us something important about modern football and about Manchester United as a club. They tell us that talent is always tempting. No matter how complicated the situation, if a player is good enough, people will talk about signing them. They tell us that fans are divided on difficult issues. There's no single Manchester United fanbase opinion. We're all complex individuals with different values and priorities. They tell us that the media will always write stories that generate interest, even if those stories are more speculation than fact. They tell us that the past isn't easily forgotten. What happened in 2022 and 2023 still matters. It still affects how people think about Greenwood and about United. And they tell us that football clubs face complicated decisions that go beyond just what happens on the pitch. Running a club like Manchester United involves managing stakeholders, protecting reputation, considering social responsibility, and balancing many competing interests. These are valuable lessons even if the specific transfer never happens. The verdict: separating fact from fiction. Let's summarize what we actually know versus what's speculation. Facts. Mason Greenwood is at Marseille and playing well. Manchester United likely have a sell-on clause in his contract. Some media outlets have reported United's interest. There are connections between United and players who leave. Speculation. That United are seriously planning to sign him, that Ruben Amorim specifically wants him, that a January move is being considered, that Marseille would be willing to sell, that Greenwood wants to return. The gap between facts and speculation is huge. That's the key takeaway from this whole story. Are United aware that Greenwood is playing well? Almost certainly. Do they have scouts who watch League One? Of course. Do they know he's their former player who might be available? Obviously. But there's a massive difference between being aware of a player and actively planning to sign them. There's a huge gap between having him on a list of potential targets and actually making a bid. Based on the evidence available, this story is mostly speculation built on a small foundation of facts. It's a logical connection that media outlets have made, but there's very little to suggest it's an actual plan that United are pursuing.